Manfred, the ruler of Otranto, has a daughter named Matilda, who is beautiful and pure, but whom he neglects, and a son named Conrad, who is sickly and unremarkable, but whom he favors. Manfred is eagerly anticipating the wedding of his son to Isabella, the daughter of the Marquis of Vicenza. Despite Hippolita, his wife, warning him of the dangers of an early marriage for their son due to his poor health, Manfred blames her for her supposed infertility. Manfred's friends are too afraid to criticize him because of his temper, but the servants openly gossip that Manfred is attempting to avoid an ancient prophecy. The prophecy states that the castle and lordship of Otranto should pass from the present family whenever the real owner should be grown too large to inhabit it, although the servants cannot see how it relates to Conrad's marriage. Matilda is described as a young and beautiful virgin, highlighting the societal importance placed on virginity as a commodity, valuable for its potential for marriage and procreation. This is the same value that motivates Manfred's interest in Isabella and his lack of interest in his sterile wife Hippolita. Despite this, Manfred still shows favoritism towards his son over his daughter, demonstrating his sexism in a patriarchal system where Matilda would still be considered valuable. The peasants correctly assume Manfred's motives for the hasty marriage, but they lack evidence to support their claims. This highlights the contrast between the simple and superstitious beliefs of the peasants and the more refined and charitable interpretations attributed by the nobles to Manfred's impatience. The wedding is scheduled on Conrad's birthday, and on that day everyone except Conrad is present at the chapel. A servant is dispatched to fetch the young groom, but he returns to the chapel in fear and points silently to the court. The entire group is gripped by fear, causing Hippolita to faint. Matilda and Isabella attend to her while Manfred goes to the court to investigate. To his horror, he finds that a colossal helmet with black feathers has fallen from the sky and killed Conrad. According to Walpole's prefaces, the story is propelled by terror. The people in the chapel are all terrified without knowing what caused the servants' fear. Hippolita faints, a common reaction of overwhelmed noblewomen in Gothic literature. The irony is that Conrad dies on the day of his wedding and his birthday, which is made even more absurd by the fact that he is killed by a giant helmet falling from the sky. This helmet is the first supernatural occurrence in the story and triggers the fulfillment of Manfred's feared prophecy. The appearance of the giant helmet and the prophecy about the real ruler of Otranto being too large to fit in a castle suggest that the true ruler was the owner of the armor. Initially speechless, Manfred appears to be more interested in the giant helmet than the death of his favorite child. He shows no concern for his wife and daughter and instead orders his servants to take care of Lady Isabella. This leaves Hippolita shocked and distressed, and she is taken to her room by the servants. Matilda and Isabella help her, with Isabella seeing Hippolita as a mother figure. Isabella is secretly relieved that she no longer has to marry Conrad, as she does not love him and fears Manfred's unpredictable temper towards Matilda and Hippolita, despite his occasional kindness towards her. Although Conrad was Manfred's favorite child, Manfred's apparent lack of concern for his death implies that his interest in Conrad was primarily linked to his marriage with Isabella, which would solidify Manfred's family's claim to the throne. Manfred's disturbing order to take care of the Lady Isabella hints at his later sexual advances on her. Isabella's implicit view of Hippolita as a mother figure positions Manfred as a father figure, albeit a terrifying one. This quasi-father-daughter relationship between Manfred and Isabella makes Manfred's sexual interest in her doubly incestuous, since she was also intended to be his daughter-in-law. Manfred is completely engrossed by the giant helmet in the court, and he becomes furious when a young peasant points out that it resembles the helmet on the statue of Alfonso the Good in the church of St. Nicholas. He grabs the peasant, accuses him of treason, and threatens to kill him. However, the peasant remains composed and gracefully frees himself from Manfred's grip before humbly inquiring what he did to offend him. Manfred does not reply, but he commands his servants to apprehend the peasant. At first glance, the peasant's behavior seems to contradict the dichotomy set up by Walpole between the naive and superstitious peasants and the dignified and refined nobility. However, the contrast between the peasant's observant, dignified, strong, and humble behavior and Manfred's unwarranted rage ultimately reveals their true natures. This revelation suggests that the peasant is actually Otranto's rightful ruler, while Manfred is a usurper who stole the throne. Upon the peasant's return from the church, they report that Alfonso's statue is without its helmet, and Manfred reacts with panic and rage. He accuses the young peasant of killing Conrad using witchcraft and commands his men to imprison him under the giant helmet. As the other peasants form a mob, enthusiastically supporting Manfred's vilification of the young man, Manfred's friends try to persuade him to reconsider the severe and unjust punishment, but to no avail. Manfred's response to the peasant's claim is irrational, of course, and highlights his unjust and unrefined nature. By ordering the peasant's imprisonment, he reveals himself to be more akin to a peasant than a nobleman, a contrast that is underscored by the divergent reactions of the other peasants and nobles. Although the peasants join Manfred in accusing the young peasant of witchcraft, the nobles recognize the baselessness of the accusation. After regaining consciousness, Hippolita's attention turns towards Manfred's health, and she orders Matilda to attend to him. Despite being afraid of her father, Matilda follows her mother's orders obediently. However, when Manfred opens the door, he fails to recognize Matilda and demands to know who she is. Upon learning that she is his daughter, Manfred harshly orders her to leave, stating that he does not want a daughter. Hippolita remains devoted to Manfred despite his cruelty and her inability to have children. She sends Matilda to comfort Manfred, but when he opens the door, he fails to recognize his own daughter. This foreshadows two later events in the book: Manfred's failure to recognize Isabella as a daughter, and his failure to recognize Matilda, which leads to deadly consequences. Manfred's statement that he does not want a daughter implies that he desires a male heir and wants Isabella as a wife, not a daughter, in order to produce sons. The act of having the light taken away from Manfred and Isabella, leaving them in darkness, signifies the sinister nature of Manfred's intentions. His inability to remember Isabella's name highlights the overwhelming nature of his desires, which seem to reduce all women to mere objects for him. Manfred's forgetfulness, both of Isabella and Matilda, suggests that he connects the two of them in his mind, and that his desire for Isabella is just a substitute for an even more disturbing desire for his own daughter. Manfred's desire for multiple women producing multiple heirs, expressed as a need for numerous supports, is not only immoral due to his desire for bigamy, but also because of the incest that such a marriage would entail. Isabella is taken aback by Manfred's behavior and assumes that he suspects her lack of affection towards Conrad. She assures him that she would have been a faithful wife had they married, and that she considers Manfred and Hippolita her parents. However, when Manfred curses Hippolita and implies that he would make a better husband for her than Conrad, Isabella is confused. It's not until Manfred explicitly states his intention to marry her that she realizes what he truly desires. Despite Isabella's protests that he is her father-in-law and Hippolita's husband, Manfred insists that he is divorcing his wife to produce more sons through Isabella. He then grabs her and announces his intention to have sex with her that night, leaving Isabella horrified. Isabella's initial loyalty to Manfred and Hippolita as her parents shows her dutiful nature, and she is initially unsuspecting of Manfred's intentions. She is aware of the moral implications of a marriage between herself and Manfred, recognizing that it would not only be incestuous and sinful, but also a betrayal of Hippolita. In contrast, Manfred is willing to pursue any means necessary to achieve his desire for power and extend his family's rule, regardless of the immorality of his actions. As Isabella runs away in terror, Manfred pursues her, but is momentarily distracted by the moonlight shining on a giant helmet through the window. Isabella accuses Manfred of acting against the will of heaven, but Manfred remains resolute, stating that he will not be stopped by heaven or hell. Meanwhile, a painting of Manfred's grandfather mysteriously moves out of its frame and beckons Manfred to follow, but the door to the room slams shut before he can enter. Despite Isabella's attempts to appeal to Manfred's conscience by reminding him that his sinful actions go against God's will, his arrogance and earthly desires prevent him from acknowledging that he is not more powerful than God. However, his claim of superiority over heaven is immediately thwarted by supernatural occurrences. As Isabella is frantically trying to come up with a plan to escape from Manfred, she realizes that going to Hippolita for help is not an option, since Manfred might find her there and harm both her and his wife. Instead, Isabella remembers an underground passage that leads to the church of St. Nicholas, where she hopes to find refuge. As she sets out on her journey, the atmosphere is ominous and unsettling, with eerie silence, howling winds, and creaking doors adding to her fear. When she finally reaches the entrance to the secret passage, the wind blows out her lamp and she sees a mysterious figure whom she believes might be the ghost of Conrad. Isabella's escape from Manfred is characterized by elements that have become standard features of Gothic literature, which were first introduced in the castle of Otranto. These include secret passageways, unsettling quietness, eerie winds and noises, and sudden darkness. Such elements have not only become widespread in Gothic literature, but have also become recurring features in contemporary horror novels and films. The stranger whom Isabella encounters turns out to be a kind person who offers to assist her and protect her at any cost from Manfred. Together they open a trapdoor, but they soon hear the voices of Manfred and his attendants. Isabella quickly descends the stairs before Manfred arrives, but the trapdoor closes between her and the stranger. When Manfred arrives, hoping to find Isabella, he discovers a young peasant who had previously escaped from a giant helmet. Manfred interrogates the peasant, who distorts the truth to safeguard Isabella. The peasant, who had been unjustly imprisoned by Manfred, demonstrates his chivalry and kindness by assisting Isabella in her escape through the trap door, a common feature of Gothic literature. His actions reveal him to be a potential hero of the story. As Manfred considers whether to forgive the peasant, his servants Diego and Jacques arrive, visibly scared. Although their speech is disjointed and unclear, they manage to convey that they saw a giant armored leg in the courtyard while searching for Isabella. The peasant expresses a desire to investigate this strange occurrence, and Manfred is impressed by his bravery, despite his humble appearance. He permits the peasant and some servants to accompany him to Hippolita's apartment. The supernatural intervenes once more to thwart Manfred's search for Isabella, this time through the appearance of a giant leg in armor. The peasant's brave response to this event, despite his low social standing, suggests that he may actually be a noble. Furthermore, his interest in embarking on an adventure aligns with the chivalric literature of medieval knights. The narrator then shifts to a flashback of Manfred in the moments following Isabella's escape. Manfred searches for Isabella in Hippolita's room, rejecting his wife's attempt to comfort him and demanding to know where Isabella is. He accuses a bewildered Hippolita of jealousy, suggesting that she knows something, and orders her to send him her chaplain before he departs. Manfred's mistreatment of Hippolita as he pursues Isabella as a bride reflects the patriarchal norms of their society, where men held dominant roles in relationships and women were expected to remain loyal and subservient. After meeting Hippolita and her chaplain in the gallery, Manfred is temporarily calmed by his wife's kindness and feels remorse and shame for his mistreatment of Hippolita and Isabella. Despite this, Manfred is unable to resist the temptation of his exquisite villainy and once again becomes convinced he will be able to convince Hippolita to agree to a divorce and persuade Isabella to marry him. He orders his men to guard every exit and detains the peasant in one of the castle's rooms to be questioned further the following day. Although both Hippolita and Manfred suspect the giant leg in armor to be real, they publicly dismiss it as a mere story to avoid causing panic among their subjects. Hippolita attempts to calm Manfred down by denying the supernatural events reported by the servants, despite secretly believing in them. By prioritizing her love for Manfred above divine intervention, Hippolita is placing her own interests above those of a higher power. Manfred experiences a moment of emotional upheaval and nearly repents for his wrongdoings, but is ultimately unable to let go of his sinful desires. It is noteworthy that Hippolyta's submissive behavior as a devoted wife reinforces Manfred's authority and enables him to continue committing sins.